situation where you find that a person look at the same.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
Welcome back to Daybreak on Trust TV this beautiful Thursday morning. Now we're going to take a look at the front pages of the dailies to see what's making the news. We'll start with Daily Trust newspaper, and it comes with this major headline on the front page. 2023 budget, Finance Ministry on the spot, over 424 billion naira padding. And it comes with riders here that says lawmakers decry insertions. Ministry denies allegations. And it's a ploy to divert taxpayers' funds, says Rafsanjani. And it's being investigated, according to Malami. Details of that can be found on page 4. And of course, you'll find a pictorial here of the redesigned Naira denominations that have been creating a lot of buzz since they were launched yesterday. Another headline on the front page of Daily Trust reads, Turji holds 5 Zamfara residents after 10.5 million naira protection levy. Details of that can be found on page 5. And switching quickly to politics now, Ganduje flags off APC campaign in Kano, assures of victory. And in legislative issues, reps seek agency for Almajiri and out-of-school children. Details of that can be found on page 26. At the very bottom of the page there, as Buhari unveils new Naira notes, 165 billion Naira mopped up. And it comes with riders here that say CBN decries banks' low response and redesign notes not targeted at anyone. Details of that can be found on page 19. Towards the top of the front page there, the belts underneath the nameplate. Ohaneze Northern Elders Forum seek renegotiation of Nigeria's unity. And fuel scarcity spreads as in Lagos as ex-depot price hits 205 naira. EFCC, ICPC, others to monitor campaign spending, says INEC chair. Details of that can be found on page 24. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
Okay, let's take a look at some more stories on the Punch newspaper this morning. The lead story on the Punch says Paris Club refund, governors stop deductions, consultants head for French court. And some of the writers there say governors will end up embarrassing Nigeria after overseas court ruling. That's according to consultants. States won't allow illegal payments to consultants despite DMO promissory note. And this is according to the NGF. And you'd find a pictorial there that talks about the new Naira, CBN, EFCC to track large withdrawals. You'd find other interesting stories on the Punch as well. NNPC meets marketers as petrol scarcity bites harder. Obi's plane grounded, campaign train seeks alternative arrangements. And then poll ranks Obiano as best Anambra governor since 1999. Ekiti San says speaker's impeachment coup d'etat. Police kill Ocean Prince, hoodlums raise palace. And then you see the story about excess crude account declines by 89%. These are the major stories on the Punch.
Next, we'll look at the Blueprint newspaper, and it goes with this headline on the front page. Buhari unveils redesigned Naira. Terrorists want new notes as ransom. And riders here to say 165 billion Naira current notes already in banks' vaults, says the CBN, and says we'll return to cashless economy. Nigerians to fill many forms to withdraw large amounts. And another rider here that says change in color won't add value to Naira, says the PDP campaign team. Details of that story can be found on page 8. Now, still going down the front page, talking politics now. Muslim ticket. I'll remain in APC, work for Atiku, says ex-SGF Lawal, and that can be found on page 5. The belt at the bottom of the front page there has these stories. Pantami unveils new book today, secures 16.7 billion naira for broadband access. And another story here that says remove Ngige now, ASU tells federal government. Kolmani oil project, Bauchi to work with Gombe for mutual benefit. And federal government, states, local governments share 736.78 billion naira in October. Suspected herders invade Enugu community, kill 10, raise houses. Details of that can be found on page 19. Moving on to more stories now. Buhari appoints aide in chairman NDDC board. And how Sergeant Rogers killed our mother, says Kudirat Abiola's children. $1 billion looted funds recovered since 2015. That is according to the federal government. And details of that story can be found on page 8. Right below the nameplate, INEC goes tough on violations of campaign finances, insists on BVAS. And it has riders here that says to publish guidelines on finances, election expenses for parties, candidates. Makes online manual copies available in 9,583 locations and commissioned to deploy physical, spiritual strategies against vote buying. And details of that can be found on page 5. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper.
Well, I like that you're giggling, and I'm looking forward to reviewing that story.
Most definitely. I mean, like the spiritual strategies will be
absolutely
very interesting.
Okay, let's take a look at some more stories on the Nation newspaper this morning. Electricity crisis. Governors reject sale of 10 power plants. NGF insists on legal solution to $418 million Paris Club refund fee roll. You'd find the story also about the new Naira notes. President Buhari is saying it's difficult to fake new Naira notes. You'd find that story on the Nation newspaper as well. And then you see the story about Ogun Central monarchs back Abiodun for second term. Bandits demand new Naira notes to free abducted victims. That's a very, very interesting story, and it's on page 6 on the Nation newspaper. Tinubu inaugurates Ebonyi Government House Road. Ronaldo, Neymar begin World Cup quest. It also found the story about ex-AGF Idris returned $900,000 cash. Witness tells court. These are the major stories on the Nation newspaper.
And next we'll look at the Guardian newspaper, and CBN rallies support for cashless economy, unveils new notes, and has riders here that says new notes fortified against counterfeiting, says Buhari. Emefiele, EFCC, ICPC to track withdrawal of large volumes of cash, and old banknotes should be allowed to phase out over time. Adi insists, and experts say currency redesign has no economic relevance. Now, that's the major story on the front page of The Guardian. And 2023, UK is watching Nigeria closely. This is according to the British High Commissioner, and he tells the politicians. Details of that can be found on page 6. The news belt underneath the nameplate here. 2023 poll will dislodge desperate politicians, Igini Amadi declare. And HIV prevalence in girls, women 60% higher than in men, says NACA. Details of that can be found on page 4. And still on the front page of The Guardian, Ashiru accuses El Rufai of plunging Kaduna into debt, unfolds economic agenda. And details of that can be found on page 9 of The Guardian. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of The Guardian newspaper this morning. And with that, we wrap up the reeling out the headlines at this point on Daybreak. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll take a deep dive to analyze these headlines. Do stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
Welcome back to Daybreak on Trust TV. Right now we're going to go deep into the newspaper review and of course analyze the headlines that we've just reeled out on the show. And of course, to help us do that, we have a friend of the house, and talking about Nasir Lawal, who is the editor-in-chief, Dateline Nigeria. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for always coming through.
Thank you.
It's always nice to have you. It's always nice to have you here as well. All right, so let's go straight to it. I don't want to talk about the Naira notes, redesign of the Naira notes. I mean, we've been saturated with that news since yesterday, and it's there, and a lot has been said. One thing I want us to really look at right now is the front page of the Daily Trust, the major story there. Finance Ministry on the spot, over 424 billion naira padding of the budget. I mean, it said that was inserted into the budget and wasn't there before. We thought we've heard the last of these padding issues. How did they expect to sneak in 424 billion naira without actually nobody noticing? And we're saying we don't have money in Nigeria.
Well, nobody knows where the money is going to come from. Probably it's something that the government wants to, get from some people. We keep borrowing. Probably it's some of the amount that we intend to borrow.
Okay.
But the padding thing, I remember in 2016, President Buhari at that time, what he said, even as a former minister, former president, former head of PTF, he didn't know the word padding, that he was hearing it for the first time. But now the word has been so overused that I will not be surprised even if pupils at kindergarten now know what it actually means. And I will also want to congratulate the editor for this headline because it captures the whole thing, because so many people are making the accusations. The defense minister said so many amounts were inserted into his budget. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs also said the same thing. The Minister of Health also made the same allegation. And then you also have some agencies and departments saying the same thing. But the ministry has come out to say no, they are denying all the allegations.
Okay.
It's good that the Attorney General is assuring Nigerians that it's actually going to be investigated. But this is not the first time we'll be hearing about something like this happening, and then the government promising to investigate, and then in the end nothing happens. Because in 2016, like I said, 2017, 2018, it keeps occurring all the time, and the president will say those responsible will be punished, and then in the end.
So do you think this is one of those incidents whereby this will be forgotten by the next news cycle?
Well, that's my thinking, because if what happened in the past is anything to go by, then this thing will also fizzle out before you know it.
We're also seeing that some are actually thinking that it's a ploy to divert taxpayers' funds. This is according to the head of a civil society organization, Rafsanjani, reacting to that.
Well, if you look at it, sometimes I don't know why, we need to even be talking about things like, budget padding. Because the executive and the legislature, they are from the same political party. I want to expect some level of understanding between them, before all these things become public. If there is any project that you want inserted into the budget, why don't you engage the executive at the point of, preparing this budget, so that we don't end up with allegations from the president or from the minister saying that what we budgeted, has been substantially changed by the legislators, and even without any thinking going into it, because before something gets into the budget, some level of homework must have been done and what have you. But for you to just come because you think you need to have national spread, you want to have something to show to your constituents that you are also representing them very well, you end up coming up with issues that are not in the initial estimate. So I will expect the government, like I said, since the legislature and the executive are basically from the same political party, to be able to engage, one another, so that we don't end up with all this embarrassing issues like this.
Okay. All right. Well, we're still staying with the legislature. A bill passed second reading yesterday about setting up for Almajiri schools and all that for and out of school children. Do you think having an establishment like that will go a long way in reducing the number of out of school children that we have, and most especially in the north?
Honestly, I don't think it will change anything because the issue of the Almajiri thing, you know, the way it has been bastardized, because that's what so many people will tell you. It purely boils down to you know, not taking your responsibility seriously as a parent, and then the government failing to also do what is needed, because if people will be held accountable, you know, like you have a son, you have a daughter, and then you can't let her out on the streets, you know, without any form of supervision, claiming to be maybe sending her to somebody who his loyalty is to his own family first. That's why you see all these small children, you know, begging on the streets and then getting something to actually take back to their teachers. So if the government will play its role, and then also the parents, you know, to be able to be responsible for the children that they, you know, are responsible for bringing into this world, then the issue of Almajiri will, you know, be addressed. But to start thinking of coming up with agencies and what have you, honestly, you will end up just making the work of government more bogus, and then maybe like what so many people will say, maybe creating some jobs for, you know, those who you think deserve some compensation from you.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Well, there's a very disturbing story on the Daily Trust newspaper and also on other papers this morning. The one about Turji holds 5 Zamfara residents after 10.5 million protection levy. And I'm also seeing that they want the ransom paid with the new Naira notes.
Yeah, they want to tell you that they are also moving with the times. If the government is saying that by January 31st, the old notes will cease to be legal tenders, then the terrorists are now telling you the same thing. Because what the terrorists are actually doing is to challenge the authorities of the government. You know, how do you expect, you know, somebody that is not elected, has no mandate whatsoever, you know, now having the temerity to even come out to tell people to pay, you know, for protection and what have you. Where is the government? So the government is actually failing in its responsibilities, and that's why all these non-state actors are now becoming more powerful, because anytime they speak, even the people tend to believe them more than they believe the government, because if they make a threat, they will make sure they follow up on it. And sometimes the government will make promises, but in the end,
They will not be kept.
they will not, you know, be there to fulfill it.
Okay. All right. Well, we hope things get better in that aspect. One story that actually made the rounds, of course, and the Blueprint newspaper actually carried it, and other papers as well, is the appointment of the new NDDC chair, which has generated some controversy. This particular person was appointed as an INEC commissioner at one point. Lots of dust was raised, and now the same person, Loretta Onitshe, has been named as the new chair for the NDDC. What do you make of that?
Well, it seems ab initio, you know, the government was only interested in compensating the presidential aid, and when they did the first one, you know, to nominate her as an INEC commissioner, you know, so many people drew its attention to the fact that she is a card-carrying member of the APC, and by that it means she may not be fair to all others. But now that the president is, you know, bringing her as the potential chairman of the NDDC, then people will now say, what excuses will you now come up with? Because she is, as far as the president is concerned, she is up to it. You know, she is is something that she will be able to do. So it's now left to the Senate to also do its due diligence to see whether, like they did the first time, they will come up with 1 or 2 reasons why she may not be able to hold that position. But I just see it as, compensation for all the things that she has been doing on behalf of the president.
Quite interesting. Ibrahim, what was that story again about the prayer?
Yes, actually, I actually wanted to touch on that. I mean, like, it is on the Blueprint newspaper. Now we heard that INEC goes tough on violations on campaign finances, and of course, it's insisting that the PVAS will be used. But that's not the interesting part of it. The interesting part of it is that Commission says it's going to deploy physical and spiritual strategies against vote buying. Now this is quite interesting. You understand? Because if INEC is saying it's going to go spiritual in order to fight vote buying, what could that mean? Are we hiring voodoo specialists? Are we going? Is it prayer warriors we're going with? Are we doing sacrifices? What exactly are we going to do?
Well, it simply means going through the religious bodies, because like they will tell you, Nigerians are among the most religious people in the world. Even though what you see on the streets, tend to contradict all that. But I think what they are trying to say is religious leaders actually play a very important role. If they come up with maybe a message, a sermon to tell you that if you collect money, to cast your vote, you will be maybe committing a sin, or something. And then for those who do not like committing, sins and what have you, that may strike a chord in them that, okay, you shouldn't do this. But for so many Nigerians, maybe that's why they said they will also involve the physical part of it. So that, because as far as so many people are concerned, if you bring the money, don't collect it.
People are hungry.
Well, the message, whatever the message from all the religious leaders, if you bring the money, they will collect it. So that's why they are telling you, okay, they will do it physically and spiritually, so that those who will respect, the messages from the religious leaders, the religious bodies, fine and good. Those who will not want to do that, then they take care of it physically, maybe through the use of anti-corruption agencies
and the police and the rest of it. Okay, so they're going to appeal to the spirituality of Nigerians. Not that we're going to go and hire voodoo specialists.
No.
But really, in times like this, how many of us are that spiritual, to not take money?
Well,
particularly when it has to do with elections.
Like you said, when people are hungry, honestly, their ability to reason, it takes the back seat. What they want is to be able to take care of their immediate need. And if they see the money coming from the politicians, playing that role, they will do it. So the first thing I will expect the government to do, or I will expect INEC, to insist that the government should do, is to be able to fight, the level of poverty that you see in the country. Because most of the things that are happening, people have their self-pride. If I have, what to eat, I have, enough to take care of my family, honestly, very few people want to, disgrace themselves, asking for pittance from politicians. Absolutely. So that's what we should worry about, because the level of poverty, the last time they said 132 million Nigerians live in multidimensional poverty, which means it's beyond what people are actually even expecting.
All right. Well, we hope there's an improvement there when it comes to the quality of life. Well, since we've already started talking politics, let's just look at it. A lot of people have been saying that the campaigns so far for 2023 have not really focused on the issues, and they've been going back and forth, lots of mudslinging going around. And there's this headline on The Guardian that actually reads, Ashiru accuses El-Rufai of plunging Kaduna into debt, and he unfolds his economic agenda. Now, as a politician, do you need to make your opponent look bad before you can be able to sell yourself to the electorate?
Well, it has become the norm. I remember the governor of Kaduna State himself saying it in the past, that his job as a member of the opposition is to keep the government on its toes.
Okay.
You know, it's for them to be able to bring out all the bad things that the government is doing. So it's now also the responsibility of the government to also defend itself.
Okay.
You know, it's what Ashur is actually saying is the Kaduna State governor has collected or has been borrowing, you know, huge amount of money, and then things that he may not be able to pay, you know, before he leaves office. So whoever is coming in will have to like continue along that trajectory, because government is a continuum. What your predecessor did, you just have to live by it, because it's the government actually, not the person running it. So what Isa Ashuru said, I don't see it as anything different from what El Rufai said should be the job of those in the opposition. Right now, Isa Ashuru is also trying to replace El Rufai as the governor of Kaduna State. So I will expect him to actually be able to bring out all the things that he thinks, you know, the people will find uncomfortable, you know, that the government of the day is actually doing, so that maybe that will give him some chance, you know.
But is this really healthy, you know, for our polity?
Well, it's for the people to decide. You know, if a politician should come out and be telling you things like this, I think what you should ask him is, okay, we've had so many things in the past. What are you going to do differently? You know, so that you will not put us in the same position that you are now accusing the governor, you know, of committing. So we should be addressing the issues, even the people. You know, we should forget about the people, the ability of politicians, you know, to drag themselves in the mud, simply because they think that's what Nigerians want to hear. And sometimes if you go on social media platforms, that's what we discuss. You know, we don't discuss the power situation in the country. Nobody is talking about the insecurity. And like now that the World Cup is on, you can see all our discussions is
focused on that.
So sometimes it's the people that should be able to
drive the conversation,
push the politicians, you know, to engage in discussing the real issues, not just mudslinging.
Yeah, all right. Zainab, you have a story there on electricity?
Yeah, the one on the Nation newspaper this morning, talking about electricity crisis. Governors rejecting sale of 10 power plants, but the NGF is insisting on legal solutions to $418 million Paris Club refund fee roll. Well,
that also means we are a long way, you know, from addressing the challenges in the power sector, because even the states, you know, the federal government and all the components, you know, they can't even agree on the best way to approach it. So you see, solution is actually not in sight. And then for the Paris Club refund, I think the governors and even the federal government should be able to find a way of agreeing, because the consultants right now are threatening to go to court. You know, and then the governors are now saying, no, that amount of money should not be deducted and paid to the consultants. But what the Minister of Justice is actually saying is the fact that you are part of this agreement, so why are you like now trying to backslide, you know, when things are nearing completion or something like that. So that's what I also believe. It should be allowed to go through the legal process, but then the governors especially also need money, because you know, they need to pay salaries, they need to keep the machinery of government working and things like that. So they should find a way of doing away with this within the shortest possible time, so that the money that is due to them, you know, they will be able to access it and engage in any form of development activity.
All right, well, trying to develop, go into developmental activities, at least that's the primary responsibility of governors. Exactly, and that's what they should do. So, on that note, that's how we are going to wrap up the newspaper analysis this morning. Nasir Lawal, thank you very much, as always, for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for lending a voice on that very funny story there.
Yeah, exactly, for clearing the air, so to speak, on that and other issues as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, still Daybreak on Trust TV. We'll take a short break, and when we return at the top of the hour, the show continues. Do stay with us.
In a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that